Which is the Bloomberg of the technological world. When you go to these niches, Israel is perceived differently than elsewhere. So we're going to talk about that as well. But first of all, and you know this better than me, if I take the average John Doe out there in Wisconsin and I throw the name Israel at him, probably what's going to come up to his mind is, well, maybe, this photo, which is the Holy Land, so a lot of holy places, looks a little old. Not so much related to my everyday life, but it's an important place, historically. And he'll say probably, oh yeah, it's a Jewish state, so maybe these ties, would come up to his mind. They look weird to John Doe. He doesn't really know what these are, so he can't really relate to them. All right. Oh yeah, Israel's in the Middle East, so probably geographically it's the desert. And of course he knows from the news that Israel is the world capital of violence, war, intifadas, bad news. And that's usually, I would presume, is the Israel that is perceived instantly by the average John Doe out there around the world. All right, then he goes to Google Earth and he looks, geographically about Israel. Let's be, analytical here. Here's the world, and I'm closing up on the Middle East. So you see that red dot right there? That's Israel. Great. And yeah, that's the neighborhood that we're living in. And we don't seem to really get along in the neighborhood, but this is, the environment. So then we take a closer look at Israel. All right, so here's the East Mediterranean basin. There's Turkey up here, Syria over here, Lebanon, Jordan, that's Iraq, Saudi Arabia, that's the Sinai Peninsula, and that's Cairo, that's the close neighborhood. And that's Israel smack there in the center. Let's take Israel top to bottom. So, oh yeah, 50% of the country is actually desert, which is what I expected, but 50% is actually looks green. So this is Israel top to bottom. I'm zooming in on central Israel. And so here's Jerusalem, where I'm sure you're going to visit in a day or two. And here's Tel Aviv, where we are right now. By the way, how many people here have never been to Israel before? Oh, great. So this is a great, intro to where are we right now. So this is Jerusalem, this is Tel Aviv. And I don't know if you see this red line that goes right here. It has another small brother over here. So I've painted it in green for you because it's referred to as the green line, which separates 1967 Israel, which is that part, and what is referred to as Judea, Samaria, the West Bank. Depends on the views, and I'm not going to discuss politics, which is this part and that part. Okay. A little bit more for an introduction on Israel. Oh, by the way, that small corridor you see right here, and I'm sure you're going to pass this corridor more than once, is approximately 8 miles long. So you can literally walk it in less than half a day. Sounds promising. Okay, it's about an 8 million people country, Israel. And even if I add up the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights, whatever you want, and I take everything together, it's approximately the size of New Jersey, which is the known equivalent, or if you're from Europe, a little bit smaller than Belgium. So that's about the size of countries. So I went to the World Economic Forum and a few similar ratings, and I look at the clean and dry facts. So Israel is rated first in the world for scientific research. Pretty peculiar when you think of the initial impressions. We're rated first in the world for entrepreneurship. Doesn't really add up with the war zone that probably comes to mind for people who don't know Israel. First in the world in information technology skills. You said there were a few engineers here. So Israel is known as a powerhouse for IT capabilities. Now, it doesn't really add up. First in the world for expenditure on R&D. Of course, it's a percentage of GDP. We're a small country. But on average, we expend most on R&D. So the only place in the Middle East with no oil, and it took him 40 years. By the way, if you take the average walking distance of a Bedouin plus his herds, multiply that by 40, and multiply that by a lot of people, which also is slowing down the pace, we could have got to Canada, Northern Europe, Australia, the Far East, mathematically. But still we ended up here, the only place without natural resources. And the cliche is that when you have none of the above here, then the only resource that you really have is your own brain. There's a very, very interesting message here. It's not only in high tech. If you look at the Academy Awards in the past few years, almost every year there's an Israeli film nominated for the foreign film. It's because a lot of creativity spurs out here from the cinema niche that we have here in Israel. If you open the radio here, you have a ton of local Israeli music. I'm not sure how many of those small countries post-World War II have their own local music industries that are so wide, from rock music to techno to whatever you want, folk music, everything from everything. Huge diversity.